Welcome to this episode, and thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. I am Tyler Johnson of Elev8, Educate, Rejuvenate. This episode is full of energy, packed with practical tips. We've got my man Brian Cain. His mental performance strategies have been used by thousands of elite performers and top athletes worldwide, including industry-leading companies like Burton Snowboards and Fuddruckers, UFC world champions, multiple NCAA champions, and hundreds of athletes from the NBA, PGA, NFL, NHL, and Major League Baseball. He shared some great extra stuff that you can find in our show notes as well. Let's start to dominate the day with my man, Brian Cain. Take us through a bit from college baseball player to now being mental performance coach to top baseball, softball programs, and much, much more across the country. Tell us a little bit about that journey in between.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Tyler, the reason why I maybe could be the most sought after consultant in mental performance in baseball and softball now is because I was college baseball's biggest failure. And I think in life, you have to be able to look at adversity as your advantage and the things that you go through at the time, which are the hardest things for you. When I was a junior in college, I had a shoulder surgery. Basically, the light bulb goes on that, hey, man, you're not going to play professional baseball. What are you going to do with your life? And at the time, that shoulder surgery, which was the hardest thing for me because I'm like, oh, I'm not going to play pro baseball, which every guy thinks they're going to play pro baseball if they're playing Division I college baseball anywhere. And I went on this journey to kind of figure out, like, why was I so, bad in college and so, maybe good in high school? And part of the reason why I was good in high school, 21-2 as a high school pitcher, was because I was in a very small town in Massachusetts. It's like being the best snowboarder in Mexico. Right? You think you're good based off of where you live, but comparatively speaking, you're not very good. But I didn't know that growing up, right? So I go to college, everybody's good. I'm now no longer the biggest, fastest guy and I was never the fastest, but the biggest, probably strongest guy on the field because I was just bigger than most people I played against in high school. Then you get to college and you're one of everybody. And as David Goggins always says, right, you're constantly becoming the common of the uncommon, meaning when I was in high school, I was uncommon. You go to college, I'm now the common again. Everybody's good. Yeah. And if you're going to go from college into pro, you're the uncommon of college. You go into pro, you're common. You're good in the minor leagues, you're uncommon, you make it to the major leagues, and you're common again. So you're constantly trying to become the uncommon of the common, right? And I never achieved that in college. So I went on this mission to find out what would have helped me as a player. Because I felt like the attitude was there, the work ethic was there, the energy was there, everything was there, except the focus was on things I couldn't control. The focus was completely on the outcome instead of on the process. And I 100% identified with what I later learned was called athlete identity, is how I pitched that day dictated how I saw myself as a human being. And I remember my freshman year basically having a nervous breakdown on campus when I saw one of the girls who I'd gone to high school with in Massachusetts, 3 hours away here in Vermont. And she's like, what is wrong with you? And I just was like, I can't take it. Like I've completely identified my whole life as an athlete. And now I'm failing for the first time ever. And I don't know what the hell to do. I'm trying everything and nothing's working. So her dad being a college hockey coach is like, hey, why don't you go talk to the sports psychologist on campus? So I went and talked to her and it was helpful. But what really changed for me was on July 4th, 2000, I remember it clear as day. I walked into a Barnes & Noble in Boston, 600 West Boylston Street, right across from the entrance to Fenway Park on the campus of Boston University. He was down there for July 4th. And I walked in because a buddy of mine wanted to get a postcard to send back to his mother. He was from Alaska. And I go over to the book section, the baseball section in the Barnes & Noble across from Fenway, and there's Heads Up Baseball by Ken Ravizza. Now, as we're doing this recording, I have a face of Ken Ravizza tattooed over my heart because he passed away in July of 2018. But reading that book changed my life because it changed my perspective. And one day, one book, one podcast like we're doing today can completely change the trajectory of someone's life because it changes their focus. And your focus is what determines your future. So I read the book, I sent him an email and said, hey man, I want to be a college baseball coach and you're a professor at Cal State Fullerton, happens to be one of the top programs in the country. Can I come do a master's in sports psychology with you and be a grad assistant or volunteer with the baseball team? And it was like the best case scenario, because I got to hear the Ken Ravizza, who I didn't know at the time, but is like the John Wooden of sports psychology, the godfather of sports psychology, teaching the mental game in the classroom. And then we would literally, all of our grad students would follow him like he was the Pied Piper. We'd go see him work with Fullerton baseball, Fullerton softball, UCLA volleyball, who was winning national championships, and the Anaheim Angels, and all these teams in between. And we got to see in the classroom how he taught it, but then what he did on the field. And I think that's the missing link in mental performance, is how do you take it from the textbook or the classroom and put it into practice on the field? And I think because I got to see him do that, and I got to be a coach in one of the top college baseball programs at Cal State Fullerton, won the national championship in 2004, was able to see not only an elite mental performance coach in Ken, but what is an elite college baseball or athletic program like Cal State Fullerton? How does that run? How do they run their staff meetings? How do they plan practice? How do they plan the entire year? So I got to see the best of both worlds, and I've just been privileged to kind of be able to take that now to people that bring me in to work with their team.
Right on. Great stuff. You mentioned there the influence of Dr. Ken Ravizza. What would you say is one of your greatest or lasting memories of Dr. Ravizza?
Oh man, I mean, there's so many of them from the first day of class where he walked in, and I'll try to channel my inner Kenny, where he's walking around, he's saying, you got to be in control of yourself before you can control your performance. You got to be in control of yourself before you can control your performance. I'd suggest taking out a notebook and writing down, you got to be in control of yourself before you can control your performance. You got very little control of what goes on around you. Fitting for this time that we're recording this right now in the midst of the coronavirus, but you got very little control of what goes on around you. Total control of how you choose to respond to it. And he would just say those over and over and over and over again for like the first hour of class. And you were just writing until it became ingrained in you, because those are essentially the two fundamental principles of mental performance. You have to be in control of yourself before you can control your performance. That's why routines and everything and breathing are so important to keep you in control of yourself. And then he'd say, you got very little control of what goes on around you, but total control of how you choose to respond to it, which was basically E plus R equals O, event plus response equals outcome. So I remember that moment very vividly. And then I also remember this one where he'd say, in the next class, right? I want you to imagine you're at a banquet. That banquet's at the end of the season. You're retiring from being a coach. You're retiring from being an athlete. We got some athletes in the class. And he says, every one of your teammates, your coaches, your friends, your family, they're at this banquet. And at this banquet, after a meal of grilled chicken and soggy salad, which they have at every banquet, and he would laugh, he said, someone's going to stand up and they're going to talk about you and your character, in your work ethic, in the type of teammate you were, in the type of person you were on and off the field. What do you want them to say about you? And we'd start writing. And it was like 15 minutes, dude. And you're just writing and writing and writing. And people are crying because they're finally reflecting on, like, who is it I want to be? How do I want to be talked about at the end of my career?
Yeah.
And then his whole thing, as he wrote on the board, was, make today your banquet. And he walked out of the class, and that was it. And it was like, just, he had this way of captivating you as a student. And, a 3-hour class would go by in 3 minutes. I mean, I literally went, after 2 classes, I went and bought a laptop computer, which I didn't own, and I went and bought a voice recorder. And I sat in the front row, and I'm like, this is what I want to do with my life. I recorded every lecture, and I started to take notes on everything he would say, because I could type faster than I could write, and it would be easier for me to go back to, and I still have those things today. But those were 2 of my memories of many. And I think one of the things you could include in the show notes here, when Ken passed away in July of 2018, it was obviously a very difficult time for me. And I have 2 pictures in my office, my wife and I, and then me and Ken. And, I wrote an article called the KR 70 Thoughts about Ken Ravizza, because he was 70 years old when he passed. So if you would include that maybe in the show notes, I think that would be of extreme value for people, just because of everything that Ken said, man. It was like, it may not have hit you at the time, but you'd hold on to it and it would hit you at another time, because it was so, so powerful and yet so simple. The things you would say, it was always kind of revolutionary.
Definitely. We will include that here, linked up to this as well. Outside of Ken, you've also had the opportunity to work alongside some phenomenal athletes. Along that process, is there a lesson you've learned from an athlete, something that you took away, had a big impact on you?
Yeah, I mean, I've been very lucky. 2 Cy Young Award winners in David Price and Jake Arrieta, Heisman Trophy and NFL Rookie of the Year in Kyler Murray. 5 UFC world champions, including George St Pierre, who's, you can see here. And I would say the biggest thing I would take away that was most earth shattering for me was probably George St Pierre. And at the time when I started working with him, he had won the world championship and beaten Matt Hughes. So he's world champion at 24, maybe number 1 pound for pound in the world. And then he gets knocked out by Matt Serra as an 11-1 favorite at UFC 69 shootout, Houston, Texas, April 7th, 2007. So I started working with him after that. And this guy who you watch on TV and he looks invincible and he's so good. He's a fighter, and he's maybe the best mixed martial artist ever, arguably, you could say. And at the time when you meet with him, you get this preconceived notion of what someone's going to be like because you watch him on TV or whatever, right? And then when you meet the guy, you're like, he's just as normal as anyone else. He has the same fears and same insecurities as anyone else. And the cool part about him is he's willing to admit it, and he's willing to then go to work for it, right? And go to work to fix it. And he'll say in interviews, one of the best things that ever happened to him was when he lost his title to Matt Serra, because he learned about the respect for preparation. He'd say, I didn't prepare the way I should have for Matt Serra. I thought the guy won a reality show. Everyone was telling me I was going to mop this guy up, and I didn't take him seriously. And he paid for it. And Matt Serra fought better than he did that night. And the thing that George will say, even in it, and I can send you a link to this if you go to YouTube and type in George St Pierre highly questionable. There's a piece from ESPN where he's getting ready to fight Michael Bisping, who was a client that George actually introduced me to. So it was ironic to see those 2 guys fighting for a title in Madison Square Garden. That was a surreal moment watching that happen. And I remember George being on ESPN. I'm on the phone with him before he goes in to do this ESPN interview on highly questionable. And they ask him, do you remember when you became confident? And he's like, confidence is a choice. It's not the mental state. He says, you choose to be confident. He goes, Saturday night, when I get inside of the octagon with Michael Bisping, I'm going to be afraid. He's going to be afraid because we know what the outcome can be. And he goes, but when you're willing to admit your fear, you can use it as fuel. And he says, you learn to fake it until you make it. He said, and when you start to fake confidence, you have a transformation and you become confident. But he said, by the time I get to the cage, because of how I carry myself in my routine, he's like, no matter what happens in the locker room, the dressing room, no matter how I feel, I act different than how I feel, and I get myself into a certain state to be able to go into the octagon and compete at a world championship level. He goes, but fear is real. Because you know what the outcome can be. And I've seen way too many like motivational speakers that come into college football locker rooms or teams, and they're like, hey man, fear is not real. You got to be fearless. And I'm like, look, man, there's 2 types of people: those who are fearless and those that are crazy.
Right.
So that was the biggest thing I think from him, was that one of the toughest athletes in the history of the world has fear, has self-doubt, but he learns how to use it as fuel. And to me, that was revolutionary, because I think when you talk to any athlete and they're being real, they all would say that they experience self-doubt or fear, or maybe sometimes a lack of confidence. And when they understand that that's normal and that you can go to work on that and you can act different than how you feel, and that confidence is a choice and something you do, not something you feel, it completely changes their career. And just another example, Jake Arrieta, who won a Cy Young with the Cubs in 2015, in the second half of that season, Tyler, he put up statistically the best half of a pitcher in Major League Baseball history, right? The All-Star games at the middle of the season, it won't be this year probably, but the All-Star games at the middle of the season in the second half, statistically best ever. Jake Arrieta wrote the word ace underneath his hat. I had no idea he did this. He first heard this like in 2007 when we started working together at TCU, 6 or 7. And here he is in 2015 still writing ace underneath his hat. Acting changes everything. And if the best fighter maybe in mixed martial arts history and a Cy Young Award winner who has got the best half of the season in Major League Baseball history, right? If they have to remind themselves about confidence, so does probably every other athlete on the planet.
No doubt, especially the younger athletes, I think, these days, as they come up and navigate a new world. Speaking of navigating a new world, I know you want to impact that world. I think it's with certifying and working with 10,000 coaches. Is that correct?
Well,
is that the mission?
I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, because it's so I wrote a course called the Mental Performance Mastery Coaches Certification Course, MPM. And people can access it if they go to briancain.com/certification. And the goal is certify 500 coaches a year for 20 years. So 10,000 coaches. And if those 10,000 coaches, a guy like yourself or someone listening to this, you're going to touch the lives of 1,000 athletes easy over the course of your career, depending on when you go through the certification. And 10,000 coaches, each touching 1,000 lives, that's 10 million lives. And if on my gravestone it says Brian Cain was partially responsible for educating, empowering, and energizing 10,000 coaches, which touched 10 million lives, then I feel like I've had a successful life.
No doubt. No doubt you will achieve greatness along the way of achieving that. So moving on, I know Dr. Ravizza, and I think your experience is being around some of the best. When I hear you speak about, that next play mentality and moving on to the next play, you do it better than anybody. What's one tip you can give young athletes out there, helping them shorten that cycle between mistake and that next play that's coming?
Ask yourself this one question. Are you that bad that you need every play to go your way to win? And the answer is going to be no. Well, then get over it and move on, right? Because I think sometimes the athletes think that they try to play perfect. And Joe Madden and Ken Ravizza were like two peas in a pod. They started together when Madden was a hitting coach with the Angels back in like the early 80s. So then Joe took him to Tampa and then took him with him to Chicago. And Ken would always say, are you that bad? You that bad that every call's got to go your way? Every play's got to be made behind you for you to win? No. Good. Move on. I think the other thing that him and Joe Madden coined that I thought was so great and genius was they said, be present, not perfect. Like, it's never going to be perfect. And you don't need it to be perfect. You actually want it to be hard, because the harder it is, the more you like it, the more it teaches you about yourself, which is essentially what sport is about, is teaching you about how to be more successful in life through challenges and things between two sets of white lines. So I think that's the biggest thing, is understand you're not that bad that every call has to go your way to win. But then the other key piece, Tyler, is that these athletes have to have something to go to, because it's going to get hard. And as you climb the ladder of competition, JV, freshman to JV to varsity to college to professional, as you climb that ladder, the talent gap becomes thinner and thinner because everyone has talent. So when everyone has talent, what's that mean? There's going to be more adversity because the competition is better. So you're not going to win as often. It's like a good high school batting average is 600. A good college batting average is 400. A great Major League Baseball batting average is 300. That makes sense, right? Because the competition gets better, the pitchers get better, the defense gets better. So you have to have something to go to, and that thing to go to is what I call your release routine. So a release routine, the way I teach it with any sport, is it follows a 3-step process. So the 3-step process to release would be: step 1, have a physical action and make an association. So for example, a hitter, boom, doesn't like the pitch, steps out, bat under the arm, batting gloves. And that association of undoing my batting gloves is I'm unstrapping that last pitch. I also take a deep breath, which is step 2, to blow that last pitch away or that last play away. Then I say to myself, right here, right now, or get a fastball, or I say something positive to myself of what I'm trying to do with my focus. And if you Google Aaron Judge plays in the dirt, and I can send you a link to this for the notes, there was an ESPN article where Aaron Judge talked about in his rookie year after the All-Star break, he had an 0 for 20 slump. And he talked about going back to his days at Fresno State, where what book he read? Heads Up Baseball by Ken Ravizza. The book that changed my life. I'm hoping this podcast changes people's lives. But when he read Heads Up Baseball at Fresno State, he said he started playing in the dirt. And you'll watch Aaron Judge where when something doesn't go his way, and I can send you a video of him doing this in a game, is when something doesn't go his way, he'll pick up dirt, put it in his gloves, look at the left field foul pole to say left field, let it go. He'll throw the dirt and then get back in the batter's box as part of his release routine. So you got to have something to go to when the garbage hits the fan, because the garbage is going to hit the fan. And when it does, let's be ready for it.
No doubt. Great advice. One of the things I also admire and love about you is not just your willingness to push others, but you're a competitor. You're always out pushing yourself, doing triathlons, I think, around the world, it seems like these days. I know we're kind of on a hiatus, it seems like, of gathering and competing, but what was on your horizon for this summer as far as some competition?
Well, it's funny. If you go to briancain.com/calendar, I got my professional calendar of where I'm at speaking-wise and coaching-wise, but below that is my race calendar. Because the only reason I do triathlons is because I want other people to do it with me. The only reason I run is I want other people to do it with me, right? Like, cool. To me, I get just as much satisfaction, and this is what's on my race calendar for this coming weekend, as a matter of fact, is I get just as much satisfaction about jumping in my swimming pool for about an hour and a half, riding that bike right there inside the indoor gym for 112 miles and getting on that treadmill for 26. Like, to me, that workout is a really fun day of 12 to 14 hours of suck. But the thing that if I'm doing it alone, that's easy. I'll just go there. Like, that's more convenient for me than flying to Hawaii and doing a race there. But if other people are coming with me, then it becomes about the experience. And for me, fitness and these races and the triathlons are so much more about the collective experience and the suffering that you go through, the shared adversity you go through with other people, and the bonds that that creates for life, more so than it is about, like, I want to be an elite fitness athlete. Like, I just want to be good enough with fitness so that I don't go back to being the 240-pound Brian Cain. I like being at 190 pounds. I'm 50 pounds lighter than I was when I was a high school athletic director. I'm embarrassed yet very proud to say that. I'm embarrassed that I let myself get to that point. But I'm very proud of the fact that I had an accountability partner and a mentor who's recently passed away, named Dr. Declan Connolly from the University of Vermont, who was my mentor in college, undergrad. And he said to me one day, he said, Mr. Cain, he's an Irish guy, Mr. Cain, if you're going to be this mental performance coach and you go in front of all these high-level performers, you got to at least look the part. He said, leaders aren't fat. You're sitting here at 240 pounds, you got a 44-inch waist, and you can't even run a mile with me. That's what happened to a Division I college athlete. You got to bring that guy back. Other people aren't going to take you serious until you take yourself serious. In that moment, as much as it hurt, completely changed my life and set me on a different course. And, so races for me, man, I've got Ironman Texas in November, half Ironman Texas in October, half Ironman Traverse City, Michigan in August, Seattle, September 20th, my birthday, half Ironman in Seattle. And between now and then, my wife and I are doing these things called vacation races, where we'll go every 90 days. I try to take my wife, the bear, and we go and do what I call 90-day getaway, because I travel about 280 days a year. So every 90 days, I try to capture her. We go somewhere for like 3 days and do something cool. So we're going to Yellowstone. We're going to do basically half marathon on Saturday, half marathon on Sunday in Yellowstone, and then Yosemite, and then the Grand Tetons. So we're kind of going to take that little national park scene. We'll see what happens, obviously, with the controlling the things you can control with coronavirus here. But one of my highlights already of 2020, probably one of the highlights of my life, if I had to make a top 10 list, was this past weekend. I had a total immersion learning experience where I have 9 high school coaches. It depends on the audience, right? So it could be college baseball coaches. It might be as general as mental performance certified coaches. It might be as specific as high school athletic directors. So I had 9 high school athletic directors come out to Arizona. They stay at my house. 2 guys on air mattresses here in the office. I got a bunk room with 4 beds. We piled 3 into another room. And these 9 guys came out here, and we did, it's a lot of physical, mental, kind of spirit, not to say necessarily spiritual, but physical, mental, and kind of like just growth training, in terms of growing yourself mentally with mental performance, which I would consider also spiritual when you're reflecting on that, not religious. Right. And then it's also, mental growth and physical training. So we did a triathlon. Half triathlon, half Ironman. Now, my best time on a half Ironman is 5:22 Santa Rosa, and my lowest time was probably 7:45 Whistler. I got crushed by heat. This half Ironman, I scheduled it to be the hardest one in North America. I called it the 7.3 Peaks. You swam in a pool, and we rode our bike from my house to South Mountain, which is 28 miles and back. And then we ran from my house. I live right in Paradise Valley, Arizona. We ran from my house over Camelback Mountain and then down this about 6 miles in the desert up to the top of Squaw Peak. It took us 13 and a half hours. Man. And of 6 of the 9 guys said it was the greatest physical accomplishment of their life and the hardest thing they did. And 2 of the other guys played golf all day. They didn't do the triathlon because they had some injury. And one of the other guys is a professional triathlete from Dubai who came over as a guest speaker. So, it was one of those moments where I'm like, that's what this is about. This is about stretching your limits, pushing yourself, and finding out what you're capable of. Because when you extend out of that comfort zone, you realize that there are no limits. The only limits that we have are the limits that we put on ourselves. And whether it's running 100 miles, 1 mile at a time, or signing up for an Ironman, which I did in June of 2016, not owning a bike and not knowing how to swim. And what do? You figure it out. You get a coach, you work a process, you swallow your ego and your pride, and you say, I'm going to suck at this, and this is why I want to do it. And then you just learn the process, and you go out there and you do it. And as long as you're not going to quit, if you don't quit, they can't pull you off the course. So just don't quit, and you'll get anything you want. And whether it's doing it in triathlon or in running or writing a book or going to school, it doesn't matter how long it takes you to get the PhD. They still call you doctor.
You love it. You can tell when you talk to Brian about triathlons, he gets a little excited. I love it. That's one of the things I love about you. And you talked about kind of the journey, from the college baseball player to where you are now. if you could go back and visit 16-year-old Brian, high school age Brian, of all the things you've learned, what's the one little nugget of advice that you would want to whisper into 16-year-old self?
Man, good question. I think I would say the difference between a boy and a man is a man lives out of principle and a boy lives out of preference. Principle is I have a guiding light and a set of core values or core principles that dictate who I am, what I do, and what I don't do. And living out of preference is I do whatever I feel like doing that best serves me in the moment. And I think a lot of us, probably in youth, me especially, was very me-centered, was very preference-based, and I did what was easy. I didn't challenge myself academically. I wasn't the most honest person. And I think if I look back, there's a lot of that behavior that no one ever really held me accountable for. I don't know if people knew I had some of those behavior traits, but the bottom line was I never learned to hold myself accountable for that. And if I could go back, I would say, hey man, grow up and live out of principle, and let's identify what your principles are. And I think for me now, my principles, I like to refer to the acronym as DELP, D-E-L-P, discipline, energy and excellence, love, present, process, and productive. And I think if I'm disciplined and as defined by having a daily plan and sticking to it, energy and excellence as always working to be the best version of yourself, love as unconditionally giving of yourself and expecting nothing in return, and then present as being where your feet are. The most important day is the one you're given. Process is you can accomplish anything with the right time and training. And then productive as have a daily plan and execute it and get shit done. And that's like the plan, I think, of my core principles. Of when people talk about, if they've had an experience at an immersion with me, if we've worked together in a coaching capacity, if they've been to one of my live events or seminars, or they know me as a person, I'd want them to say, man, that guy's disciplined. He's got energy. He's committed to excellence. He's loving. He thinks that he gives the most of everything he has to other people and loves what he does every day. He's present. He understands how to reverse engineer any goal into a process. And then he's productive. He doesn't sit around and I couldn't tell you the last time I watched TV, and all these people complaining about like, oh, I can't believe professional sports have been closed or canceled. And I'm like, look, I work with a lot of those guys and I don't watch them play unless there's someone playing that I know. I don't watch because I'm not trying to watch other people live their life, man. I'm trying to be my own best version. I'm trying to be my own pro athlete and what it is I'm trying to do. I don't want to sit on a couch and get entertained. And I think it's one of those things that I call TJ the E to E ratio, man. Education to entertainment. Like look at the apps on your phone. How many of the apps on your phone are for entertainment, Candy Crush, and other ESPN versus education, Audible? Or other books around there. Now, some of them are neutral. Southwest Airlines is a neutral thing, right? We can use that for entertainment, going on vacation, but also education. I'm going to a seminar, so it's neutral. Throw it out. But just ask yourself, man, if you're listening to this and you're not getting the results that you want, ask yourself this. What is my E to E ratio? If I got time to watch TV, then I got time to get fitness in. If I got time to go on to Facebook or watch Netflix, guess what? I got time to write a book. So you can be, have, and do anything you want if you just stop making excuses and get out of your own way and start having a daily plan and execute on that plan. Sorry, man, get me fired up here. You got this damn sign behind you that's getting me jacked up every time you move. I'm looking at this thing in your office.
Wrap up some of our questions here. The last one I always like to ask people is, I'm sure you probably have a great one, but how do you, in a simple way, define success?
It's funny you mentioned that. I'm going to show you how I define success. So I'm going to share my screen here. I know we're just doing audio here, but I want you to see this. One of the things that I do every quarter is called the MVP process. And the MVP process is something I would encourage people to do. It's called the mission, vision, and principles. So what's the mission of your life, right? Educate, empower, energize other people to be their best. Your vision is what are the goals and things you want to accomplish. And then my principles, as we talked about earlier, of DELP, right? But I have on there for myself my own definition of success. So my definition of success is behaving in alignment with my mission and principles on a daily basis. And I think before I knew what my mission was of educate, empower, energize other people to be their best, my definition of success was bank account, number of championship rings I got, number of books I could write, and those things are not that important, man. The thing that is most important is what are you doing to give back to the world so you can empower, educate, energize other people. For me, that's where I'm coming from. But I think it takes a while to get there. It takes a while to get to that place where you realize that a life is only as good as in what it does for others. So my definition of success is completely based off of, did I get to live and execute my mission today in service to others? Did I get to educate, empower, and energize other people today, and then live out a principle? So my head hits the pillow. I'm going to say, hey, thank you, Tyler Johnson, for giving me an opportunity to educate, empower, and energize other people through your podcast. And did I bring energy on this podcast? Was I loving of the people listening to this podcast? Will I do anything for them that I can within my control if they contact me at Brian Cain Peak on Twitter or Instagram? Yes, I will. And I feel like that today I had a chance to live my mission. So today was a successful day. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to do that, my friend.